Hey there, YouTube. Welcome back to Artichoke Dip, Solo RPG Gamer. So, I've been thinking and coming up with some ideas for some new videos, and I've been looking at some new games out there and playing those. I'm going to do some videos on those later. I'm still getting used to the systems right now, and once I really get it underneath my belt, I'm going to do a video and show you guys what I'm talking about. But I decided I'm going to do something a little different, and this time I want to do a series of videos and talk about some of the game systems and get into them a little bit more depth and show you guys a little bit more about them. For two reasons. One, to kind of, how do I put this? I kind of had like a gaming awakening. I've always played fantasy RPGs, and well, all RPGs are fantasy basically. But anyways, I picked up one that wasn't like a sword and sorcery type one, and played it. And to my surprise, I really enjoyed it. And it made a light bulb go off. It made me think, and it's like, wow, there's a whole nother world out there, and I'm hoping maybe through some of these playthroughs, maybe some of you guys can see some of these different game systems and maybe take away from it that aha moment like I had, and want to venture maybe more into some of these different systems. So for this video, I decided to kind of go way back. And before you say, oh, it's Dungeons and Dragons, no, it's not Dungeons and Dragons. This one is Palladium Fantasy that I'm going to talk about, and then I'm going to do a solo, show you guys how I run it, and give you an idea. So before we get into the meat and potatoes and things, let's talk about what Palladium is and what Palladium isn't. Okay, for those of you guys out there that play basic fantasy, D&D, 5th edition D&D and stuff like that, there's a lot of similarities between Palladium and that. Of course, it's set in a world of high fantasy, of skullduggery, magic, and of course armor and sword. One of the things that's may take some of you, if you really enjoy like basic fantasy and D&D and those type of games, to wrap your mind around about this one, is in this fantasy setting, your goblins and orcs and everything aren't really the bad guys, and for most part, actually, you can play one of them as your character class, and so that aspect of it kind of, how do I put this? At first, it kind of pushes people off a little bit, but it shouldn't. Now, the other two races that inhabit this fantasy world, one is the Kyle, which are a humanoid coyote breed that rules most of the great northern lands, and they have their own political system and government and heroes and so on and so forth, and just like you would find in any character class, as far as cleric, druid, fighter, barbarian, so on and so forth, those are all represented there as well. They also have another one called the Ratlings, and the Ratlings are a humanoid rat type of being that is like their subterranean. That would be like their goblin in this world. Now, that's not to say that you can't change it up, because they give you all the stats, and you, if you wanted to create those and put them into the game system, you could. But the way I'm going to play it is the way that they have it set up. Now, for the game system, Palladium, one thing I will tell you, when you open it up, it'll seem extremely overwhelming. And it's really not that bad of a game. And it's actually very simple. Character creation is extremely simple. Unlike, I'm going to use D&D as an example. One of two reasons. I think it's actually the most popular role-playing game out there, and the majority of people who do play role-playing games have played D&D. So it's a starting point, a real good referencing point for me to explain this. And two, I'm very well versed in D&D, as we all know. Okay. so character creation with this, they give you templates. Just like you would have in D&D, you'd have all your classes. Those are represented here. The nice thing is you roll up your 8 attributes. There's 8 attributes in here. And from those attributes, let me get over here and I can, here we go. So out of your 8 attributes, your characters have intelligence, mental endurance, mental affinity, physical strength, physical prowess, which would be like your dexterity, physical endurance, which would be the same as your constitution, physical beauty, which would be like your charisma, and then of course your speed. Now, just like D&D, you would roll 3d6, and anything from a 16 higher is considered a very, how do I put this, significant attribute. And then at that point it has a chart ranging all the way from 16 up to 30 that gives you bonuses. Now, very cool, because that's where it really comes into where you can really customize your character the way that you want it to. Now, they give you the character description and you can read through it, and let's go through the character classes so you can understand. So, in our character classes, now they consider these occupational character classes, OCC. We're just going to call it classes to make it simple. So they have the druid, monk, a priest of light, a priest of darkness, which are going to be your clerics, an assassin, a knight, a longbowman, a mercenary, a paladin, a ranger, a soldier, and a thief. Now they group them as men of arms. And then of course your druids, your monks, and your priests are your clergy. And then you have your optional classes, which is your merchant, your noble, your scholar, your squire, and a vagabond / peasant or farmer. Now, when you go into whatever class you want to choose to play, the very cool thing about it, and I do like this about this game, and how they do this, I'm trying to find you a good example here to show you. We'll just say Powers of Darkness, right here. So, you know, you open it up and you look at this and you're just like, oh my god, I mean, look at all this reading. Now, me, I don't mind to read, so it's not that bad, but I know some people don't want to spend a whole lot of time reading, and I get that. But the cool thing is you read the caption and it gives you a really good example of the class. So it'll help you make a decision as to whether that class is right for you or not. Then when you go through that, you, at that point, assign your occupational class, your race, your 8 attributes, and then it has skills. Now this game system is very, I'm not going to say it's extremely skill heavy, but you do rely on skills a lot. Now the cool thing is your character starts out with 8 skills to that class, and you get bonuses on those skills. Now what I mean by that is I'm just going to use the example of, we'll say, tracking. Okay, better yet, tracking humans. So let's say you're playing a rogue and you get a plus 15 bonus to tracking humans. Now when you go into the skill description is going to tell you everybody starts out level 1 at a plus 30%. So your thief will be starting out at plus 45% right out the gate, which is really cool. And then you're given 8 other skill slots, and they give you the skills that they allow for that character class to choose from to detail your character even more. Now one thing I don't use in mine is secondary classes, secondary class skills, which would be like everyday skills. When I do a solo RPG with this, it just kind of does not seem really that significant to the game. Now, if I was playing in a large group with a lot of people, I can see where that would be fun because you could use some of them skills, for good humor and other situations. Perhaps you could talk your way out of being bludgeoned to death by, I don't know, an evil Kyle by offering to make him your famous 4-egg omelet. Just see, I don't know, just using an example there. So with that, you pick your skills, and then it gives you a starting package. And the starting package gives you a lot of gear to start with, plus armor. Well, depending on the class. Obviously, if you're a wizard class, you're not going to start with armor, but you'd start with magical robes. But all the classes come with a starting package, a lot of gear, plus you get gold. So you go in there, you pick your class, you detail it, and you're ready to play. That's the cool thing. That's where we're at. The book, that it's laid out, I wish they would have laid this book out a little bit better. Like any book, the one thing I do like about Dungeons and Dragons is when you go through the player's handbook, everything is set up to when you build a character, as you get to the next chapter, it just flows so nicely because all that information is at your fingertips. This book is a little different, the way it's set up, so some of the stuff you're looking for, you're going to have to flip through, go to the back of the book, go to the beginning of the book, go to the middle of the book, go back of the book again, and come back. But it's really not that bad. Once you get it down and you learn where everything is at, character creation is pretty easy. So, now, with that out there, character creation, let's talk about the difference between D&D, the battle matrices, and Palladium, because hands down, Palladium's got the best of it. I mean, D&D can't touch it. So with D&D, we all know that we have our armor class, right? Yeah. Armor class. You roll that beautiful 20-sided die, hoping to meet or exceed the armor class number, and then deal out damage, right? Well, I'm trying to get to the section of the book here. It's quite a large book. In Palladium, very much the same, but there's some slight differences here. And this is really what separates this game and makes it shine against D&D. And now, I had my page marked, and of course I lost. Alright, it's time to go to the index, people. So, we got magic. We don't want to know about magic. We want combat! Combat's at 44. Okay. So, another cool thing that I really like about this system, okay? And if you do pick up the system and decide to play it, one of the skills I highly recommend that you take, and when you read it in here you'll understand it, is athletics. When you take athletics, it gives you a +1 to strike. Now, I'm going to get at that. You're going to want to take athletics and hand-to-hand, especially if you play a men of arms occupational class, which is going to be like a fighter, a knight, a rogue, a ranger, so on and so forth. Now, level 1, all men of arms occupational classes start out with 2 attacks per melee round. You get 2 attacks per round. You get a +2 to roll with punches or fall and impact, and a +2 to pull a punch. Now, some of you may be sitting here saying, okay, what does that mean to me? I don't understand, Artichoke. What are you talking about here? Well, we're going to get into that. So, the first thing you do on the combat is you roll 20-sided die. For your side and, of course, your opponents, whoever wins the initiative takes the round. Now, the next step is for the first attacker to roll a 20-sided die. If the result is 4 or less, counting bonuses, the attacker misses. Any roll above a 4 will hit the opponent unless the defender can parry or dodge the attack. Now, this is where it's really cool. I've talked about this before. SDC, which is structural damage capacity, and armor rating come in. So let's talk about that. Body armor, how this comes into Palladium Fantasy. Body armor may absorb the damage from a successful strike to hit the physical body of one's foe. The strike roll must be higher than the armor rating AR of the protective armor. So, like armor class, your armor has a rating. And, of course, if you hit and you roll your damage, now if that damage meets or exceeds the armor rating, it's gone beyond the armor rating. Now at that time, we go into SDC, structural damage capacity. So I'm going to read the example here to you guys. Studded leather armor has the AR of 13. This means the attacker must roll 14 or higher to penetrate the armor and inflict damage directly to his foe's body. Deduct damage first from the physical SD, structural damage capacity of the body. And when that's reduced to 0, deduct damage from SDC and hit points. Okay, this may sound a little confusing to you because you're going, huh? Okay, there's 2 SDCs, structural damage capacities. One is your armor. Your armor has its own structural damage capacity. Now, when that damage exceeds the armor rating, it's deducted off the structural damage capacity, which when it reaches 0, your armor is rendered useless at that point. Now you have physical structural damage capacity of your character. At that point, when the damage is transferred to your character, first it's subtracted off your structural damage capacity. Once that reaches 0, then you start gnawing into the hit points until you go dead. Very cool system, and it really gives you a unique dynamic on the combat system, and when you play it, that's what I love about Palladium. It outshines D&D with that by far. Okay, now as the defender, if your character is being attacked, you may defend. The defender may parry, dodge, or entangle. So let's talk about that for a minute. Anytime an attacker rolls a successful hit, the defender can choose to parry, dodge, or entangle. Parrying can be done automatically by anyone trained in any form of hand-to-hand combat, which is why I said if you play a man-at-arms occupational class, you want to take hand-to-hand. A parries block the attacker's strike, preventing the character's hands or arms. A weapon attack, sword, axe, mace, etc., can be parried, blocked by a shield, sword, or other weapon or object held in a defender's hand. A weapon should only be parried with another object. Trying to parry a weapon with one's hand or arm is likely to result in a failed parry and the usual amount of damage being inflicted by the weapon. Parrying a weapon barehanded is dangerous, and all such attempts are without benefit for the character's parry bonuses. A parry can be performed without wasting a melee attack action. Characters with no hand-to-hand combat training will lose their next melee attack every time they parry. So it's extremely important, if you pick the system up and you make a men-at-arms character, you want to take athletics because it gives you bonuses, and hand-to-hand combat, because without it, you can parry. Anybody can parry. A wizard can parry. But because he's not trained in hand-to-hand combat, he loses his next melee round. But if you have hand-to-hand, you do not lose it. It's a free action. Okay, so such as energy attacks, such as magic fireballs, dragon's breath, eye beams, and so on, cannot be parried, but cannot be dodged. Defending by dodging or entangling means automatically giving up the next melee round. And entangle means the character actually pins, snares an opponent's weapon or arm. So when you go to entangle, basically same thing as grappling in D&D. You're going to give up your next melee round to wrestle your opponent to the ground. And of course, the last one, a dodge. The dodge means the character's physically moves out of the path of the attack. Each dodge uses up one of the character's attacks per melee round. So constantly dodging means the defender has no opportunity to attack. But that's okay, because if you remember, I said if you take the hand-to-hand combat, at first level you automatically start out with 2 action rounds. 2 attack actions per round. I'm sorry. So you could still dodge and attack. So as you can see, there's so much that goes into this that makes it very, very unique and robust. And I just can't say enough about it. That's what really draws me into Palladium. If you're looking for something a little bit different than D&D, something that the combat matrix might be a little bit more in depth, and perhaps this will be the system for you. Now, the one thing I can tell you about this system that is really, really cool with Palladium, the way that Palladium does their game systems. Palladium Fantasy, the character building is the same as it would be for Beyond the Supernatural, Rifts, to name a couple there. And it's very cool how they give you a template of a character. And you just take that template and you adjust everything to the way that you want it that fits you. Now, as far as storytelling and I'm going to say progressing through the game, levels, experience, and all that, D&D and Palladium are pretty much the same there. Like I said, what really sets them apart is the combat and, of course, the magic. You have a lot more options. And I thought about making a character for this game, but then I kind of said, nah, it's not going to really work out. Especially, I haven't played a solo Palladium in a while, so I kind of didn't want to be weighed down. But one of the cool character classes that you get let's talk about the magic character classes, because I mean, they really, really give you a whole lot of options here that you just don't have in D&D. Practitioners of magic. Now, there's alchemists, but those are NPCs, so you cannot be an alchemist. You can be a diabolicist, and that's circles and wards. Mind mage, which uses psionic powers. A summoner, which is circles and a master at demonologies. A warlock, which is elemental magics. A witch, which is a servant of evil. And a wizard, which is a spellcaster. Now, I want to get into the summoner, because I thought about possibly making a summoner, because which is really cool is that they create these magical circles out of these specific ingredients. Now, the power of these circles can last anywhere from a few hours to a few months to years. So it's really cool in game terms if you have one of these guys on your group, and you could have a little safe haven that they could do a protection seal on. So every time you guys go in there, you know your items and your stash, and you guys will be protected from the outside world. And That is really cool. The problem is in game terms, a lot of the circles can take 2d6 melee turns to complete without interference. So, that kind of makes it a little unappealing for the type of playing I like to do. But it would be cool as a background character to have in the background to be able to create these magical seals for, like I said, your safe havens to keep you and your party safe. Now, everything else about this system is pretty much is what you would expect to find out of a D&D or a basic fantasy module. One thing that's different that I think we should talk about is races. We should talk about the races that you can actually play in this system. That is very important. And let me get to that. They give you quite a bit of information here. Here it is, starting at 288. There we go. Or actually, I could just read that. Okay, the races that are available to the player in this system, in this fantasy system of Palladium Fantasy, is human, elf, dwarf, gnome. Seems pretty standard at this point, right? This is where it starts to change. Troglodytes, kobolds, goblins, goblin cobbler, which is like a goblin tinkerer, hobgoblins, orcs, ogres, changelings, which would be like a doppelganger, wolfen, and kyles, which basically coyotes. Now, it even goes into, if you wanted to, demons, subdemons, gargoyles, gargoyle mage, gargoyle lords, and then of course it lists the lesser demons, the Alu demon hound, aquatics, banshee, coral, labusu, ghouls. Oh my gosh. I mean, it gives you so many options here of what kind of race you want to play. I think in game terms, like a lot of this stuff, like I said, personally, I would use as encounters. I mean, I guess playing a troll would be cool, but it does have its drawbacks. Some of this stuff, like I said, I guess it would be cool to play, but I just really don't understand, like, why a ghoul? I mean, what would your character's motivation be other than to eat people? I guess that could, hey, you could make a whole entire adventure off of that. You could be a legion army of ghouls that attacks large cities to go and feast. Call it Ghoul Thanksgiving. So, anyways, let's get back into the all seriousness of this. Now, Palladium is a very, very, very vast world that is underneath the umbrella of the name Palladium. And I'm going to read off some of these areas. They actually sell these books that has adventures in it, and you can use. Now, the world overview is the Kingdom of Byzantium. Let me see if I'm pronouncing that right. Byzantium. The Kingdom of Byzantium. Okay. Then it goes into the Great Northern Wilderness, which is very, very cool. I enjoy that one as well. Very cool. The Northern Mountains, Ophid's Grasslands, the Land of the Damned, the Western Empire, the Isles of the Cyclops, the Eastern Territories, Fee and Lopan, Old Kingdom Mountains, the Old Kingdom, Mount Nimru, the Balgor Wastelands, Timario Kingdom, Land of the South Winds, the Yinsloth Jungles, Map of the Known Worlds. And I am more than certain Palladium is probably working on a whole lot more that will be released here probably soon, if not already. Now, some of the other things that you will find in this book that you will also find in D&D you may be familiar with. Of course, this does have psionics and psionic powers. And as a matter of fact, they have a whole bunch of character classes just for psionics, which they call psychics. Now, there are 4 classes of psychics that you can play in this, and that is the Mind Mage, the Psi Healer, the Psi Mystic, and the Psychic Sensitive. Now, Psychic Sensitive, if you're not familiar with that, this character class is also in Beyond the Supernatural. Psychic Sensitive would be the type of person that they wouldn't be able to see the spirit world, but they know it's there. They can feel it, they can sense it, and they pick up on it. And they're kind of like a human gauge for the paranormal, if you want to look at it that way. So, I think with that, I think I've explained quite a bit about the book, about what you can expect, and what it has to offer, which is quite a bit. There's quite a bit in here. I think this book is like, I think I paid like $25, and I went straight to the publisher because they're right here in Michigan, in Westland, Michigan, and picked this up. And as you can see, gives you quite a bit. Now, you could use this book, and of course, like I said, I started to read off all the different classes that are in here. Now, I guess if you wanted to play some of these, you could, as I explained, like the ghouls and the orcs and all that. Me personally, I would include them into the game. Is what I would do as encounters. And that's normally what I do, just to say. So, anyways, along with what it gives you in here, another book for the system that you may want to look at and pick up will be this guy right here, which is the Monsters and Animals. And of course, this is the equivalent of the Monster Manual for D&D, and it gives you, believe it or not, there's a lot of stuff in here that you're going to recognize from D&D. It's just the words are going to be changed a little bit because obviously the D&D creatures are copyrighted. So, they have an owl bear, but they don't call it an owl bear. It's called the owl thing. But it's still the same thing. So, a lot of the stuff that you'll see, that you come familiar to know in basic fantasy or D&D, you will find in here. But you're going to also find some other stuff that's rather unique and interesting to the Palladium Fantasy game system that you're not going to find anywhere else, which is really cool. Really, really cool. Can't say enough. I'm really, really ready to get into this and start playing the game of it. So, I hope if this looks like something you guys may want to try out, maybe you want to get into. Um, One thing I can tell you about Palladium's been around for quite a while, and um, I mean, I guess you could, if you wanted to, go out and buy the stuff new and pay the top dollar for it. Personally, look around. Don't sell yourself short. You'll find all kinds of used copies out there in great condition at a reasonable price. I'm holding them right, one of them right here. New, this book was $20.95. I picked this up for $5, and most of the wear in it is from me. So, but one other thing I want to get to, and this is something you got to make yourself. Now, if you're like me and you have a lot of different RPG systems, I have a lot and I play a lot. You know, one of the things I really had a hard time with, and I would start a game and I would play it, and then I would set it down to go back to it later, and what would wind up happening is my pile of papers would get scattered everywhere. So then, at that point, you're like, great. So what I did, and I wanted to show you guys what I do, this is the best time to do it. Kids are going back to school. They have these things for sale everywhere right now, and you can pick them up cheap. And this is the binder that I started for my game. And what I do, I made my random encounter tables, which I'm going to show you guys here how I do that for the game. But I put my characters in here, and they're always in here. Now, the thing I like about these little pockets, what I really like about them, is once your character dies in your current game session, you can always take the character out of the binder and put it in a pocket for later. And then when you do another adventure, you can always recycle that character back in. That's what I do. I know maybe some people may not agree with that. Some people have the mind outlook, hey, once a character is dead, it's gone. I don't look at that. I got a big binder over here of all kinds of characters. I save all my characters that I make. And I have everything from basic, first edition, second edition, third edition. Every single RPG system I have characters that are in there. And sometimes what I'll do is, if I'm sitting down, I'll make one character, I'll come up with a cool idea, and the character needs a companion, and I'm like, what do I put in there? I can always, I got this. I pull that binder out and I go through it and say, hey, this will fit what I'm looking for. And it's already made, ready to go. That's the reason why I do that. I don't ever throw them out. Only time I ever get rid of them if it's just a bad character. And, what I mean by a bad character, one of the things about solo RPG, and I've covered this in my other videos, I'm going to talk about it again. When you roll your attributes and you set your character up, you don't want to set them up for failure. You want to set them up to have fun. So, you want to pump them up a little bit. Give them a little extra strength or constitution or whatever they need to help offset that, how do we put it? The disadvantage you're already at as to having a game emulator rather than having an actual game master when you play solo. So that's the reason why I do that. And what I mean by a bad character is a character to where, most RPG books you read will tell you, here's your character attributes, roll this many dice and put that number in there. Okay, so I want to make a barbarian and he's got a strength of 7. So I got this barbarian and he can barely pick up a shopping bag, but he's supposed to defend the party, That's what I mean by that. That's how I do my characters. That's what I would consider a bad character. A good character is where you roll out your attributes and you assign them to fit your character's needs and your adventure, I shouldn't say your adventure, your gaming taste to the way that you like to game. To have fun. That's what it's about. Um, so I think with that being said, I think we're gonna jump on over to the game table and we're gonna get this session started. And this is gonna be a full session. I'm gonna show you from beginning to end. Well, not to end because um, that's gonna take quite a while. But we're gonna do some solo RPG in here so you can see how I do it. And I hope you guys get something out of this. And I hope you enjoy Palladium. And maybe for some of you, you'll pick it up and you'll start playing it and you'll get that same, whoa, that's pretty cool. Alright, so this is going to be a 2-video segment. This is the first one, the introduction to Palladium, explaining differences to you to some of the other systems you may have seen. Now let's go into the actual solo.